Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Data Dispatch. Hope everybody has had a decent day in a lot of volatility in the market that we saw, especially with a lot of the big AI, more speculative, new and upcoming retail, trendy stocks that we've been talking about, experiencing a decent cool off today. The market closing about 0.5% lower, but remaining relatively resilient. We do see an intraday bottom. It'll be interesting to see what happens tomorrow, how Palantir was affected in terms of a critical support level that was tested and held up. We'll be talking about other things like BMNR, which is actually dipping today. Ethereum still at an interesting spot, and talking about some more volatile things that are happening in terms of the political atmosphere that could bring more volatility to the market. So if you are a new or returning viewer, hit that like button, subscribe for daily videos. We're trying to hit 30,000 by the end of the year. Let's see if we can do it. Pop it up on the screen here. Palantir at 175. That's where the close was. Now Palantir was kind of here at this 182 area, getting to the top of this resistance point, the choppy sidewaysness that we've been seeing from a technical perspective, but building a base out here near these all-time highs. We saw a decent sell-off in the markets today, a lot of these big runners, and Palantir did experience a sell-off. It did. It had a lot of selling pressure. You can see these two red candles here that really took it down and testing this lower zone at about 170. And you can see here a reversal was triggered and now up at 175.49 and continuing to see a little bit of a bid, catching some momentum in the overnight session. Right now up about another dollar at 176.50. This just helps me from a technical perspective reinsure that Palantir has a ton of support here at the 170, and in terms of a fundamental perspective that Palantir is furthering out this base near these all-time highs, waiting for that next catalyst. Could that next catalyst be the earnings that's going to be happening here in just a few short weeks on a Monday post-market, November the 3rd. Remember, we have earnings per share normalized. The street estimates right here, 17 cents, and that correlates with a 1.09 billion in terms of revenue. 19 earning per share revisions have been bullish in the last 90 days, and 0 have been bearish. Currently, where the market sits, I don't have any, yes, we saw a little bit of a cooling off today, but it doesn't change my opinion about that possible $200 end of the year testing that we could see for Palantir. Can earnings be that catalyst that gaps it up there? Talking about the general market, we see Dow Jones futures, they say fall here, but the SPY is actually doing relatively okay right now in the overnight hours. It's up about $1.11. We actually have the index that closes right under 6,700, literally at 6699.4, down about 0.5%. We saw a decent amount of selling off, like I said, SPY coming down here to about 663, having a nice intraday bottom right at around that 12 to 1 o'clock hour for the markets. We're seeing Tesla that's falling right now overnight after they have mixed earning results. Basically, what you have is they didn't meet all their expectations. You still see optimism from Elon Musk, talking about Optimus and the continuation right here, the continuation of their deliveries and things like that. However, they did warn of near-term uncertainty ahead of future long-term growth prospects. One big thing is that, deliveries actually were hitting a record today thanks to the now U.S. Tax credit that's been expired for electric vehicles, the EV credit. And we had a lot of people that wanted to take advantage of that were probably purchasing that before the expiration. So could we start to see a little bit of some near-term uncertainty? Basically, I think yes. Now that that is gone, we don't know what's going to be happening in terms of demand, incentives to help push electric vehicle sales. He was upbeat about robotaxis and Optimus, though. A lot of people are investing in Tesla, not because of their vehicles, not because of them as an automaker, but them as a kind of robotic software company looking into Optimus, and of course with full self-driving and robotaxis. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. But nonetheless, Tesla's still here at 427. This stock was beat down to like 200 something in the beginning of the year, so down about $11. That's not a crazy volatile move for Tesla. Actually, kind of decent, I think, with the mixed results that we did see. Looking at some macroeconomic pieces of data that'll be coming out, that's going to be Friday. So going back to where the market sits here, market right here, still between this kind of 66, 6,700 zone. We've seen a decent amount of trading above the 6,700. With CPI data, that's going to be coming out on Friday. That is going to give us an important indicator on where the markets could be heading next in terms of volatility and for the prediction of rate cuts. And that is just because with the government shutdown, we don't really have any macroeconomic indicators that are helping to provide more of a support zone for why the market's moving in specific directions. We do have Trump, though, coming out here saying that he will make a deal with China on everything. So it's interesting to see here. Establishing, of course, those tariff threats by November 1st. I think we need to see a deal here soon. If you mix a deal here soon, that can put this behind us and start the next chapter instead of this whole mumble jumble. We might have a deal, we might not. We might have a meeting, we might not. You know, that uncertainty that lays around. If we can get that behind us, if a deal can be made on top of good CPI data, either coming in line with expectations or below, showing that inflation is staying relatively cool, that can still help with rate cuts, furthering the probabilities of that. That's where I think you can see the push through and the re-entering of a new momentum and leg for the S&P 500. However, if those things don't happen, that's where you could see it still trading in this choppy zone, still continuing to cool off. So overall, that's where the uncertainty lies, where I think is why we're seeing some of these bigger stocks starting to take a breather, and a well-deserved breather. I mean, CoreWeave down here to 121 now. You see Hood at 127. You know, these stocks that have made incredible runs, and what we've seen even with ASTS, that's down here to like 71 now. This thing shot up to 100. Nebius, that was at 130, down here underneath 100, basically at 98. Oklo taking a breather. So, you know, a lot of these big retail stocks that don't have revenue, new, had huge momentum runs, taking a little bit of a breather. However, what I do like is we're seeing some maybe rotation into the Meg 7 stocks. Those are holding up relatively resilient, and the S&P 500 overall is doing quite well. So I'm still bullish on the market, even though these stocks I think are taking a well-deserved breather. It'll just be interesting to see where their bottom is. And that leads us here to BMNR, which actually took a decent dip today. Closes here, or basically where it is right now in the overnight hours, at 48.75. At a pretty key level of support for BMNR right now at this 48 zone. You know, this gap down here, and it actually had an intraday bottom of about 46. And if we see any type of a bid on Ethereum, that could have been a decent entry point for any type of long-term positions out there for people that were really bullish. And if that comes to fruition, if Ethereum actually catches this bid and becomes a reality, because we're seeing Ethereum, like I said, that is just hanging out between this choppiness zone of 4,200 and 3,800, dipping down here to even 37.25, but is seeing a little bit of a reversal and a recovery now back at this 38. So we'll see what happens. Ethereum's kind of just hanging out here, not making a ton of moves, and I think people are getting a little impatient. However, I think when the time does come, Tom Lee is still bullish. I'm bullish on Tom Lee, which is what kind of got my own personal interest in BMNR in the first place. Once this bid and this momentum does come for Ethereum, I think it's going to go relatively quick. That's the thing, is that crypto makes these astronomical moves just a few short days in a year. So, holding here, just being patient, I think that's what I'm going to be personally doing with my current BMNR exposure. Now, let's talk about here quantum stocks, because wow. Talking about these stocks that have taken, a little bit of a cool off. We've seen things like Rigetti, D-Wave, Qubits, INQ making huge moves over like 3,000 to 4,000% year to date, or, just over the last year, going nuts. And now seeing a cool off, which I think is well deserved for these quantum stocks. And just like this, look at this. The Trump administration is in talks to take equity stakes in quantum computing firms. You can see here just this screenshot on X, INQ up over 20% in the overnight hours. The bears probably were not expecting this. So quantum is going to get even more interesting now. Talk about wow. And let's talk about another thing that's causing crazy momentum, BYND. Holy Toledo. This thing was up over 100%, basically 90% in the pre-market. You can see here, look at this gap up at the open to 770. We see a halt, and look at these red candles. That brings it down to 350. We talked about this yesterday. when things go up this high, they can come down just as fast, and it's important to be very, very careful. This is a casino right here. This is momentum right here. This is, you have no clue what's going on. You know, it'll be interesting to see what happens now with BYND. Is the meme rally already over for this? Or are we going to be entering into some type of weird accumulation phase, more retail interest? It'll be wild to see what happens to this. I'll be keeping track of it, seeing if it truly does die out, if it's the end, and it's time to move on to something else, if the memers try to run up something else, or if this thing still has some life to it. That's the crazy thing in the market, is you never know what the heck's going to happen in this world. So peace out, take care, and I'll catch you guys later.